We're moving on to the next topic of discussion. In Maharashtra, a tigress and her two cubs were found dead under mysterious circumstances in Chandrapur district. The bodies of the animals were found dumped near a drain in the Meetapur village. This locality comes under the Chimur forest range, which is part of the tiger area. A probe has been ordered into the cause of the tiger's death. There is suspicion that the local villagers are poisoning these animals to remove them from their territory. This takes the death toll of tigers in the state of Maharashtra, in this particular reserve, to 14. Since January this year, in 6 months, 14 tigers have died in one reserve in Maharashtra. Senior officers suspect that the 3 tigers could have been poisoned by farmers in the neighborhood. Joining me right now, Dr. Gerald Bennett, who's a wildlife activist in South Bingjung, former cricketer who's also careful and enthusiast of wildlife, and he also is a photographer. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Dr. Gerald, my first question to you. India spent a large amount of time saving the tiger. Are we now reversing that hard work?
Absolutely, Faye. First of all, thank you for having me on your show. We are just in an eyewash, and we are in a advertisement time where the forest department and the government is showing us all the goody-goody side of wildlife and tourism part. But on the contrary, when we talk about conservation, the facts say for themselves. We have lost so many tigers, and all we see is state tigers. State tigers are ambassador is big celebrity in the Bollywood, and they are showing everything they can to just show the bright side of tourism, bright side of forest department, bright side of wildlife. But the reality is we are losing wildlife at a very alarming rate. We are harming our environment, and our forest department and our government policies are responsible for it.
Saad is with us as well. Good evening, Saad. Now, we've had you on the channel through the day for cricket, but this, I'm sure, is heartbreaking news to you also. 1 tigress and 2 cubs have been murdered. There's no other word for it, because they were found dumped in the corner of a village, and that's not natural. How worrying is this for you right now?
Faye, firstly, thank you for having the tiger on the show. And I'll get to what happened. And you know, Faye, I gave up cricket to take on conservation way back in the 1980s. And ever since the past 35 years, I've been a conservationist. And therefore, I request my co-panelists, and I request you as an anchor, when we're talking about conservation and people like us who've been in the field for so many years, just give us an extra second, because it'll become a bit of a monologue, but I will need the time. Because at the end of the day, I want to prove that these questions have answers, except that people are refusing to look for those answers. Now, Faye, you know, in my 35 years that I've lived in the forest, the things that I've been up against is a mother who's lost a child, is a mother who's lost her cow, is a mother who's lost her, or families who've lost their crop, and they've asked for answers. No answers were given. No timely compensation was given. No compassion was given. Zero compassion. Now, we do know that that tigers are killed by poisoning the carcasses. We do know that whole water holes have been poisoned. We know that forest fires are lit. But the issue is, whether it's the PMO or the CMO of every state, why don't they come out and find solutions or answers? Because they're there. And Faye, I'll start from the 1972 Wildlife Protection Act, which is horribly draconian. It was required at that point in time because there was nothing like that, but it was a stopgap treatment to give us a larger Conservation Act, which never arrived. They drew arbitrary lines. And they said that if our animals can cross the lines, we can cross the lines, we can kill you, our animals cannot be. Our animals can kill you, our animals can kill your livestock. You can't say anything about it. We will see if we compensate you. But you dare cross that line, and we'll throw you in jail. This led to conflict. This led to such a conflict over the past 30, 40 years that today the forest officials think they're gods, and all the locals, now this is a perception, all the locals feel that the officials are corrupt. All the officials think that the locals are smugglers and poachers. Never the twain shall meet. There is no question of dialogue. There is no question of respect. There is no question of trust. How is someone going to go across to the farmer and say, please don't kill the tiger? And on top of that, Mr. Rao turns up and says that the tiger was killed by another animal before, by another predator. If that was the case, why wasn't the tiger removed, or why was timely compensation not given? Faye, the villagers are willing to change. The officials are not willing to change. At the risk of me making a lot of my forest friends angry, I'm sorry, I have to say this. My dear forest officials, you have to change. We have to absorb conservation law in India. If we don't have a standalone conservation law which takes care of our air, land and water, we will lose India. We will lose India to corruption, and we will lose India to policies which are bound to fail.
I want to ask you, gentlemen, this question. Now, a lot of the times that we've brought up tigers on this channel, on this particular show, the answer that I've got is this, that India has done such a great job with conservation that the population of tigers have increased, and now they're coming out of the territory that is reserved for them into the villages, which is why this is happening. Is that a valid response? Dr. Bennett, you first.
If we look at the trend which is going on, studies have shown, national and international studies have shown, that we are decreasing the forest cover at an alarming rate. Now, when there is shrinking of territory and habitat, wildlife spillover is bound to happen. And if the wildlife is coming out of the forest and into the villages, man-animal conflict it cannot be stopped. And if man-animal conflict is there, there is a way to deal with it. The forest policy, the government policies and the forest department's actions can be a little better, as my co-gentleman who's sitting on the panel has said earlier also. The government policies and the forest department's attitude towards the forest, towards the animals, towards the villagers is not cordial. There has to be some dialogue between the villagers, between the forest department, and solutions have to be brought out. If I would like to mention this point, Maharashtra gives the highest compensation in the entire country. There is no question about that. If there is a man-animal conflict, the highest payment is given in our state. But still our state is at the lowest in terms of wildlife conservation or tiger conservation in particular. As a matter of fact, Chandrapur happens to be the constituency of a forest minister.
Yes.
And over there, so many animals are dying due to poisoning, due to electrocution. There have been instances where in Tadoba National Park and Karandala National Park, there have been deaths due to illegal reasons. In Tadoba, there were deaths. In Karandala, there was similar poisoning in which the entire family of tigers were killed. Now, what is the solution to this? In Karandala, the tigers did not come out of the forest. They were not killing the cattle. They were not harming the human beings. But still, there was revenge killing of these tigers.
Well, I want to ask this question of Saad. Saad, here are the latest, or the stories of the last 1 year. 467 hectares of Yavatmal forest land, and we know Yavatmal forest land has tigers in it, given to Reliance to make a cement factory. 1 lakh trees to be cut for the 258-kilometer stretch of expressway between Mumbai and Nagpur, also cutting through Amravati and some forest land. At the end of the day, it's about, it can't be about one animal. The fact is that as a country, we're looking at this the wrong way, aren't we?
No, absolutely, Faye. The first thing that we need to understand, and first thing that these multi-billionaires that in India that we have, who are not bothered about the bottom line, which is our conservation, they're only interested in making money. I don't know how. They must, whether it is the most richest man in the world, he must accept that a Homo sapien is an animal. We are cousins of the apes. We become part of the ecosystem as animals. And if we, as the species on top of the chain, are going to destroy the environment, everything is going to go with it. Nothing's going to survive. There's going to be no monsoons. It's going to have huge ramification effects down the line. But listen, Faye, as long as the tigers have been there since 1972, they've been killed. Because they've come out of the forest, they've been killed. Why have they been killed? Why have you not put up fences? And this is something that I've always argued about. Just go to South Africa, bring the technology, put a fence, nothing will go in, nothing will come out. But then, like you say, the moment you put up a fence, no industrialist can come and say, I want that part of the forest. Because now that fence becomes a wall which like people like us or industrialists or the villagers can't go through, and the animals can't come out. Why don't you have proper fences? Because fences will then limit the damage that these industrialists do and the wild animals do to villagers. You ask a forest official that, he has no answers.
That is true. And I want to ask you one more question. Now, it's possible to just think that this is about one forest or one animal. But when you say, and Saad, you said this, you said, if we continue in this manner, we lose India. What happens when tigers are found dead? And we know that it's not about just tigers. Elephants are run over by trains on a regular basis in India. Animals are electrocuted. They're sort of exterminated in order to make room for human beings. What happens down the road, and how much time do we have really to reverse this process?
Is that for me, Faye?
Yes, it is, Saad. It's for you.
Thank you. Listen, what happens is very simple. If in the chain of what is happening in the environment, you're going to go there and remove the fundamental workers, and tigers and elephants being those fundamental workers of making that chain work, you're going to lose your forests, you're going to lose your green cover, you're going to lose your monsoons, you're going to lose your industry, you're going to lose your humanity, you're going to have huge drought, you're going to have desert coming into, well, literally central India and into Delhi. You're going to have ramifications which are so large. And by the way, our MOEF, our people in Delhi know this, and they've put their heads in the ground like an ostrich. They don't want to accept it because the problem has become so big. They don't want to change. I write letters to the Prime Minister's office. What happens? They forward it to MOEF, and MOEF is part of the failure. And it is now, Faye, it is now after so many years that we've got a Prime Minister who is strong enough to make changes. And he can give us a conservation law which can look into regeneration of our forests, retake over of these industrial lands from the forest, because he's strong enough in every respect. And he's not corrupt. And that is one thing that I can say for this Prime Minister. But will he do it? I don't know, because none of my letters seem to have any effect.
Well, I give the last word to Dr. Gerald Bennett. What do we need right now? How dire is this situation if we continue to kill tigers in this manner? Do we run the risk of losing them all?
The situation is very dire. We are talking about tigers right now, but we forget to address the herbivores, the other animals who are at the bottom of the food chain. Tiger is at the top of the food chain, and every tiger that is dead, we talk about it. But we have to talk about the other animals as well. And a very sheer good example of how dire the need is, that the government has to launch a drive, a plantation drive to reforest and do forestation all over the place. Itself says how much emergency there is to protect our forests, our natural resources. Internationally, Ireland has declared environmental emergency. And there are so many countries who have declared and are addressing this issue. Now, India should step up and address this issue as an environmental emergency, and new policy should come into force, and there should be some ground action, not just on books and not just on television shows and advertisements and what the government actually does. There has to be some ground reality, because this is not just tigers.
Okay, last question.
There are herbivores, there are animals, there is environment.
The last question, and I'll take this question to Saad Pingjang. Saad, when we say ground action, what can people do? So people who are watching right now, who are obviously pained by the visual, they're pained by the information that the 14th tiger to die in this one reserve, in one forest. This is not the national number, this is from one area. What can I do right now if I'm in a city?
Faye, the sad answer to that question is that you can do absolutely nothing. Because at the end of my 35 years of working with the villagers, I know that every villager, every household, every woman, every child has become a conservationist. They're willing to change, they're willing to sacrifice, they're even willing to sacrifice their own blood and their fields and their cows. But they're willing to change. But because the official is not willing to change, he's very happy playing God. He doesn't want transparency and he doesn't want answerability. Nothing can be done. So if you were sitting in the cities, what I would say is do a dharna, ask for a change in law, like my co-panelist saying, ask for transparency, ask for answerability, ask for a conservation law, a standalone conservation law. Faye, without that, you cannot protect your tiger, you cannot protect your forests.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this story. At the end of the day, it's about this. It's about demanding a better conservation law. It's about demanding that the Environment Ministry goes out of its way right now to protect the environment, that the NGT laws are in fact followed, that corporate India respects our resources, our water, our air, our forests, our natural resources, our animals, and our rivers. It's the big, the rich, and the powerful who need to fall in line. And we hope that the government will use the next 5 years to protect the environment. And we'll continue to bring stories like this to you because just because the animals have no voice and they can't tweet, some of us are going to have to do it on their behalf. Moving on to our next story at this point, Sarvana Bhavan, known for its famous dosas and its sambar. The owner of Sarvana Bhavan, Rajagopal, has surrendered himself to the Chennai police in connection with a murder case. The Madras High Court had ordered Rajagopal to surrender on the 7th of July after rejecting his plea, where he requested the court to allow him to continue his prison term in hospital. Rajagopal is convicted of murdering his employee Prince Sandakumar in 2001. As per reports, an astrologer had advised the owner of Sarvana Bhavan, Rajagopal, who already had 2 wives from 2 earlier marriages, to marry his employee's daughter, Jeeva Jyoti. Jeeva Jyoti refused to marry him. She was already in love with somebody else. She married Prince Shantakumar, but the owner of Sarvana Bhavan continued to pursue her and used his henchmen, allegedly, to murder Prince Shantakumar in 2001. He is now facing life in prison. Joining me right now, my colleague Pramod from Chennai with more on that story. Pramod, this sounds like a story from a Tamil film, really, and not from real life, but it's a story that's been brewing for a while.
It surely is, and not just a Tamil film. You can simply say that a film that could go up to 19 years, because after so many twists and turns, Jeeva Jyoti, that is Prince Santakumar's wife, has finally attained a victory. Even at the last day, there was like a lot of drama attained to it. In fact, if you could go back to the story, it started in 2001. That is when Prince Santakumar was brutally murdered, and since then Jeeva Jyoti has been fighting for her justice. And in 2004 was the first conviction by a trial court. Immediately after that, Rajagopal and his team went to the Madras High Court. There, their conviction was extended as life term. 5 members were given life term, and the rest 5 for 3 years imprisonment. Even after that, he went ahead, pleaded with the Supreme Court, and he stated that he is having health grounds, and Rajagopal was in bail. After that, in March of 2019, the Supreme Court upheld the Madras High Court's order, and by which it also gave 100 days for him to surrender. Even on the 7th of August, he did not surrender. That time, he once again went to the Supreme Court claiming that he is ill, and he pleaded stating that he would like to spend his prison term in a hospital. But Supreme Court very clearly mentioned that if he was ill, why was he waiting for the 100th day, and why didn't he plead earlier? And he was ordered to immediately surrender. Today in Saidapet Court in Chennai, he was brought in an ambulance along with the oxygen cylinders and everything, and finally he surrendered.
All right, Pramod, obviously this is a potboiler, and now he has surrendered. Thanks, Pramod, for bringing us that story. Pramod Madhav, my colleague from Chennai, the owner of Sarvana Bhavan, surrendering to a life sentence, convicted of murdering an employee because he was trying to get someone to marry him. He wanted a 3rd wife based on his astrologer's advice. The girl refused to marry him. She married someone else. It is the someone else who then wound up dead. We're going to take a quick break here on the Urban Debate. Coming back on the other side, Karnataka's political turmoil, apart from several other stories. Don't go anywhere.